Let's go to Trace Gallagher with the very latest on the investigation. Trace, the sheriff said that he couldn't tell us all that he knows, but you can bet that he probably knows something. Does that mean that they have more information that they're letting on at the moment?
Well, it certainly means that the sheriff is deeper into this investigation than we were 24 hours ago today. He really was very forthright in a lot of the stuff that he has kind of said to us. I mean, fascinating information about cameras inside the room. He said there were cameras both set up inside the hotel room and outside the room. Even a camera set up on a hotel service cart, though we don't know if that was inside or outside. The cameras outside clearly meant to be able to give him a warning if police were coming down the halls. It's unclear if the cameras inside the room were actually set up to get him shooting or get the actual firing on the crowd below. So the sheriff did not talk about that. But he did talk about the fact that over the course of the 4 days that Stephen Paddock was inside that room service did go in that room a number of times. Apparently nothing set off alarm bells. We should also note that the sheriff was unhappy. You talked about the video. The sheriff was very unhappy about the pictures being released about the weapons. We're talking about the rifles on the floor after the attack. The sheriff did confirm that at least one of those weapons, and we have heard many more, were actually equipped with something called a bump stock, which does something. It replaces the shoulder rest, and what it does is it means that the weapon still fires one shot at a time, but the bump stock means that it just kind of automatically holds the trigger, meaning the weapons can fire between 300 to 800 rounds per minute. This went on for 9 to 11 minutes. You can imagine the thousands and thousands of rounds he fired off, and the sheriff saying if they hadn't gotten there sooner, he had enough weaponry to go on for a lot longer than that. He also made some very informative decisions on the houses. The house in Reno, we now have learned, they found 5 guns, they found rifles, and they also found what he quoted as a plethora of ammunition in that house. You add to that the Mesquite house. They found 19 weapons there, explosives, and they have pulled out a whole bunch of electronics and computer hard drives. That's critical to this investigation because remember, the hard drives is where they will get all their information on who Stephen Paddock was having conversations with in the days and weeks leading up to this. And we should finally let you know that the sheriff has kind of backed into the whole question of the girlfriend. The girlfriend, remember, he said was in Tokyo. Well, now he's confirmed the girlfriend was in the Philippines. They have talked to her. They are actively in the process of bringing her back here. The sheriff did say she is a person of interest. They will be fully investigating, and he intimated that he believes that she knows a lot more than she's letting on. And finally, you talked earlier about the thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars that were sent from the shooter over to the Philippines. We have now confirmed that as well. It's unclear exactly who that money was intended for, but now you can see where the girlfriend is fully back enmeshed in this investigation as it goes forward.
Well, Trace, as always, super comprehensive, but we yet still have more questions for you. We're going to take it around the table here. Kimberly Guilfoyle kicks us off.
All right. So, Trace, we talked about the large number of, ammunition, weapons, that he built 2 sniper nests, and it's just very puzzling and disturbing to me that nobody noticed anything and thought that was suspicious, carrying in that level of equipment, that much ammunition, making noise to kind of set those 2 platforms up. It's just a lot of people have so many questions in this case. And then when you see law enforcement allude to there's things that they're holding back, that they're not going to tell us. I mean, especially it seems with this case, there's much more to this picture than we're being told.
And I think you're right, Kimberly, but in defense of Las Vegas Metro Police, they've been pretty forthright. I mean, they've given us as much information without trying to compromise the investigation. They have given us a great deal of information as this thing has kind of set forward. I will tell you, though, that it has brought up your concern about how in the world did he get, he's talking about 10 suitcases of ammunition. Right. How do you get that much ammunition? 23 guns inside the hotel room, and someone brought up, well, do we change security? Do we have these bags go through some kind of a security apparatus like they do in Israel? And that's an open question. I mean, I think the answer to that is probably not, because it would still be, it'd make a difficult situation at the security apparatus here in Vegas, the millions of people who come here a year. It would really be hard to actually nail that down, but it brings up a very good point. As for the guns themselves being set up, Kimberly, and being aimed out the window, 23 weapons inside there, dozens of other weapons weapons at the house. He bought dozens of weapons legally in Nevada and Utah over the course of the past few years. And one has to ask, this woman who lived with him in these houses where they had explosives, they had ammonium nitrate in his car. Ammonium nitrate's used was what Tim McVeigh used in the Oklahoma City bombing. So if you're that woman and you live with this man and he has all this firepower, you have to ask yourself, did she know more than she's letting on? And I think the answer for Las Vegas Metro Police is, yeah, I think she did.
Yeah, Greg.
Kimberly.
Trace, this is very difficult. Cable news moves way faster than an investigation. And it's like, no matter what we ask you, I don't know if you're going to have an answer to it. But the thing, one piece of this is that, like, they said there were no links to terror before they analyzed his personal electronic devices. Isn't that kind of premature? I mean, I'm inclined to think it's not terror-related. But if you don't look at his personal electronic devices, when you say that, that seems really premature.
And, you know, it's a fair point, Greg, but what they're talking about when they say no link to terror is they're talking about his social media footprint. And right now, this guy's social media footprint is just non-existent.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a guy who didn't have a Facebook account. So, you know, we know a lot about him personally. We know that his family says that he had no religious or political affiliation, that there were no ties to terrorism, that he didn't make any of these outlandish comments. So that's what they were going by. Do they believe that there might be something that can take them down a different road? Well, the sheriff just said sure. And as they kind of look at all of this stuff, but they were saying in the early going there was no automatic tie to terrorism. And if you look back at the shootings that we have had over the past several years, every time we get a name, we match it with the social footprint, and within hours we know right away that yes, there is something that indicates there was some outside force playing into this. And in this case, we simply didn't. And the bigger question, Greg, is was this his primary target? Did he plan to have a more elaborate attack? I mean, you throw in the ammonium nitrate, right, as a bomb. You throw in the explosives up at the Mesquite House. And the reporting now that he may have rented condos downtown in Las Vegas that oversaw a different concert that was held a week ago. Was he planning for a different venue, or was he planning on this venue but a much more elaborate attack? That might be in those communications that were brought out of the various homes. But I think, as you know, we try not to get ahead of our skis in this investigation. We get a lot of information. A lot of it's wrong, and so we try, at least to the best of our knowledge, to rely on our sources, two sources for every piece of information, and then relying on the sheriff when he starts to confirm stuff. Greg.
That's why we love you, Trace. We're going to go to Jesse Waters next.
Yeah, something about this still doesn't add up to me. They were very quick, as Greg noted, to rule out everything. They ruled out the accomplice. They ruled out ISIS. They ruled out, what? No political affiliation. Yet, did they interview anybody that the girlfriend talked to in the Philippines? I don't think so, and they haven't done a full interview of her yet. They haven't, you say, you know, he does no media footprint. He has electronic devices in his house. They haven't scrubbed those either. The guns haven't been fully traced. So I think there was a lot of put out in the beginning to rule everything out, which worries me because now I feel like we're backtracking, especially after you look at all the money that was wired overseas. Now, the father was a suicidal psychopath who was on the FBI's most wanted list, and he was highly intelligent because he was a bank robber and he was on the lam for quite some time. Right. There's also, maybe this guy just got bad DNA from his dad. He's also a psychopath. He's very methodical. Something clicked. He looked unbalanced. That seems right now, if you take out all the other stuff they ruled out, to me at least, that seems like the only thing, as complex as this is, that you can really hang your hat on.
Well, just for clarification, Jesse, they haven't really ruled out a lot of things. So they say that they haven't had the information or the evidence to lead them down this road. So when you say they're ruling things out, maybe the phrasing is they just don't have enough evidence to take him in that direction right now. So when it comes to the girlfriend, they said earlier, you know, the morning after the shooting, that there's no evidence to suggest she was a part of this at all. We don't think she is any longer a person of interest. And you're exactly right. They came back 6 hours later saying, you know what, she is a person of interest. And yes, we are interviewing her. And yes, we want to find out what she was doing in the Philippines at this very time. And today he even took it a step forward, saying, yeah, not only was she in the Philippines, but we are actively trying to bring her back because we believe that there's more to this whole story than we first thought about. Maybe they know more about these electronics they're pulling out of the home, but I think, you know, in fairness, they're not really ruling out all of these things. What they're trying to do is they're trying to take piece by piece the investigation, take the weapons, take the explosives, take the people that have talked to them and the family, and see if they can put this puzzle together, try and come up with some kind of a motivation, which right now, he said at the top of this news conference, they simply do not have a motive for why he would do that. Will they find one? The sheriff said, yes, we will find a motive. Do they have one right now? Not that he told us. Jesse.
All right, Trace, let's get to Juan Williams.
Hi, Trey. So I'm curious, too, about the gunman. And one of the things that I was reading about today in the papers was that recently he'd been involved in gambling transactions that tipped the $10,000 mark, so that required some government notification. It also said that he was an investor in commercial, I think actually residential real estate in Dallas. And finally, that what was so interesting to me is that he had worked for both the IRS and Lockheed Martin. So then the thought occurred to me, well, could it be that he had some financial difficulties? Is that possible, that his gambling was not going well, because he's often described as a professional gambler?
It's very possible, Juan, and there's two prongs to that investigation. First of all, you talk about the financial difficulties. Well, look, you run it down, and yeah, he was a letter carrier. He was a mailman in his early career, worked for the IRS, worked for Lockheed Martin, and yes, he invested in real estate. We know he has a home in Mesquite, Texas. We know he has a home in Mesquite, Nevada, as well as Reno and in Central Florida as well. So these are all properties that he owned. He didn't have renters, so clearly he had enough financial ability to pay for these homes without having them rented out. We also know that, in fact, he was sending tens of thousands of dollars overseas to the Philippines, so he had enough liquid finances to be able to do that. Was he gambling? Sure, it's on record. You have to notify the government. We know that in recent weeks he has placed exorbitant bets, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. You have to get the bets on record. We don't know whether he won or lost. I mean, his brother would often say, look, he would call him and say, yeah, I made this much money gambling. I did very well gambling. He considered himself a professional gambler. That's how he made his living. But he also had a lot of investments. Was he broke? We don't know, because we don't know if he won or lost the bets. But all indications are that he was still fairly liquid, was still doing pretty well. No foreclosure notices on his planes, his homes, and he was sending tens of thousands of dollars in cash. So all signs point to the fact that financially he did not seem destitute.
One last question from
Juan.
Greg.
Yeah, I was just going to say that when I was thinking about the money being sent to the Philippines, that doesn't say who it's going to. And so I think the assumption was it's going to this woman, but she could just very easily be a cover. He could be sending money to a foreign group. I mean, we know what's going on in the Philippines right now. I mean, there's a possibility that he could be doing that.
He could be simply trying to hide money from the IRS.
Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah, it could be, but remember, there was no escape plan here, so you're trying to hide money from the IRS. You know, there was no way out of this. He didn't leave himself an escape plan. It's not like he was saying, okay, I'm gonna shoot as many people as I can. I'm gonna haul out the back door and go to the Philippines. I think that the mentality here was different. He was sending this money for some reason, and we don't know exactly what the reason is. But to think that he was trying to shelter it in some capacity, I don't think there's any indication of that so far. But we don't have the electronics. We don't have the computer hard drives that they are now mulling over and actively looking at to find out exactly what his motivation is for doing all this stuff. The gambling, the money overseas, the looking at different condominiums in downtown Las Vegas over a different concert, the ammonium nitrate in the car. There are so many different aspects and facets to this investigation we don't have answers for. We're just kind of going step by step with the Metro Police Department.
All right, Trace Gallagher, thank you so much.